Hey everybody, it's JFeatherFan12312 here, welcome you guys to Depression Quest. This is not going to be a fun experience, but after reading through parts of it, for a while I just thinking I was going to skip this one, but no, I think it should be done. Its emotional character is probably most indescribable, except as a sort of double bind, in which any/all of the alternatives we associate with human agency, sitting or standing, doing or resting, speaking or keeping silent, living or dying, are not just unpleasant, but literally horrible. Depression Quest is a game that deals with living with depression in a very literal way. It's not meant to be fun or lighthearted, and I do have the illness. I am depressed. I'm not going to... I have a problem with depression, and that's not a problem, but I'm not suicidal. I'm not that far. Nowhere near. The goal of this game is twofold. First, we want to illustrate as clearly as possible what depression is like so that it may be better understood by people without depression. Hopefully this can be something to spread awareness and fight against the social stigma and misunderstandings that depression sufferers face. Secondly, our hope is that in presenting as real a simulation of depression as possible, other sufferers will come to know that they aren't alone and hopefully deserve some measure of comfort from that. It goes without saying that because of the very nature of depression, it is experienced differently by every person who suffers from it. We aren't trying to say that this is the best or most accurate representation, merely that this is an amalgamation of the experiences of the developers and several people who've hosted them. Many of the following encounters deal with issues such as therapy, medication, handling a love life, and reaching out to support networks. In reality, less than half of depression sufferers actually seek treatment for reasons such as lack of money, perceived personal failing, or public stigma. These things were included in order to touch upon as broad a range as possible, since all these elements can be very important to sufferers of depression, though they will likely not be the experiences of most sufferers. It is important to recognize that not everyone with depression is so lucky. Many people with the illness don't have a lot of the luxuries that we have in this game. We've written it this way so we can focus specifically on the illness, which becomes more and more difficult to deal with as the person who has it is less and less well off. The game uses audio as part of the play experience, so yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have done this, but I'm doing it. So, scroll page, enter is confirm, backspace is to rewind, I can believe that. Shift plus backspace is to advance, that's weird. Shift plus tab is to select previous option, and tab is to select next. Okay. Return. Resume. Begin. It's early on a Monday morning. You are a mid-20s human being. You have a significant other named Alex who you are rather fond of, that you have been seeing exclusively for the past few months. The rest of your social circle consists of a variety of friends and acquaintances, some of whom you met at your day job, which is a little boring, but pays the rent. You'd like to be doing much more with your life, as with your parents, but you're still in the process of figuring out what that means and how to go about it. You're also dealing with motivation issues that sometimes makes dealing with these things difficult. You feel like this is probably your fault, and on bad days you can feel inwardly angry and down on yourself for being lazy, but you're not quite sure how you can break out of it or how other people deal with these feelings and seem so very functional. You spent a lot of nights fixating on thinking about this, but never seem to do anything about it other than lose sleep. Yeah, that's a thing that happens. It's an unseasonably warm Wednesday evening. You spent the past several hours at work. The past week or so you found your job motivation flagging more so than usual. You've been in a fog practically all day today, simply going through the motions without realizing even what you've been doing half the time. Yet time seemed to be moving at half speed. You're so checked out that when your boss approaches you to tell you that it's dead and you can go home early, it barely registers. As you walk home, the streets hiss from the recent rainfall. You know that your significant other will be in classes until late, another couple hours at least. You briefly consider using this serendipitous solitude to catch up on that project you've been working on haphazardly for the past few months. As soon as you think about the work that awaits you at home, you can feel the panic creeping in from the back of your brain, unbidden. All you can think about is how incredibly far behind you are, and the amount of work seems nothing less than insurmountable. By the time you arrive home and change out of your uncomfortable work clothes, the stress is weighing down on you like a heavy, wet wool blanket. Your computer seems to be staring down from your desk. You want to sit down, but the mere thought of trying to work sends your stress levels flying. More than anything, you feel suddenly and absolutely exhausted and feel a strong desire to simply hide in bed. You are depressed, interaction is exhausting, and you are becoming more and more withdrawn. You are not currently seeing a therapist. You are not currently taking medication for depression. This one is what I would try to do. You make a stop at your fridge, turn your favorite playlist on, and sit down to start working. You open the last file you were working on, and as soon as your hands touch the keyboard, your mind goes blank. All the motivation and ideas you had when you arrived home vanish in a flash. Your brain seizes up and you find yourself physically incapable of any sort of productive thought. You take a break to loosen up, popping into your email inbox, Twitter, and various other internet-based distraction fodder. Frustratingly, this pattern continues throughout the course of the evening. As soon as you try to focus on work, your brain diverts all its energy away from the task at hand. While you keep flipping back to your work, you find the sheer mental effort involved in keeping your brain focused is overwhelming and tiring. A few Twitter arguments, YouTube videos, and sparse amounts of actual work later, your playlist flips back to track 1 and the ice in your glass is all but melted, diluting the last dregs of coke you were nursing. Look down at the clock and realize that a few hours have passed since you sat down to work and you've made negligible progress. I can just wake up early tomorrow and catch up, you think to yourself as you climb into bed, even though you know that never actually happens. You are very depressed. You spend a large amount of time sleeping, hating yourself, and have very little energy or motivation. And then the other two. It's a mild Friday afternoon. Alex calls you from one of her classes telling you that there's going to be a really awesome birthday party tonight at her apartment that one of her roommates is throwing. You've hung out with his roommate a few times with Alex and you get along well enough but aren't particularly close. You don't have work in the morning and have nothing else in particular to do tonight. You are feeling kind of run down, but you have been fatigued most of the time lately. You mention that you're feeling ill because you're not sure how else to explain those feelings to someone else and say that you aren't sure you can make it tonight. There's a second of silence over your phone, but you can swear you can hear the sound of your partner's face fall. She tries to convince you anyway. You haven't seen her this week, and she sounds pretty insistent that you come over. She even drops a few suggestively worded hints that you can stay over with them tonight after the party. What do you do? Agree to go. You agree to go even though you're not really feeling social. You know it's important to Alex, and you'd really like to see her. Seeing her does make you feel better sometimes, and you hope that this is the case tonight, even if it does mean dealing with all the usual social anxiety. The time to leave rolls around and you grab your overnight bag. Alex's apartment is a short walk away, and there are already people hanging out on the porch. You feel your chest tighten as you approach the building and try to steel your nerves. You quickly find your partner chatting away with the birthday girl, and Alex immediately lightens up when she sees you. "I'm so happy you came. I wasn't sure if you were going to make it." A younger man taps her on the shoulder and she turns back to you to apologize and let you know they have to do something for the party. Alex hands you a beer, plants a kiss on your cheek before going off to deal with whatever came up. As you look around, you don't see anyone else you recognize. That's what I would do. Alex leaves you with a beer. You're unsure of what to do with yourself. Everyone else at the party is sectioned off into smaller groups of people who know each other, and you feel like it might be too rude to butt in on any one of their conversations. As you're looking around, you can tell that you don't really know anyone else at this party. The birthday girl turns to you and thanks you for coming. You chat with her a little until she is approached by other friends and she introduces you to them. You have very little in common with any of them, and they all seem to have known each other for a very long time. However, they're still friendly, albeit a little drunk, and you ask yourself and ask you about your life and do their best to include you. You actually start to relax a little, but feel slightly excluded when you're the only one who misses an inside joke about someone's professor. Sorry. You proceed to make small talk with that group until your girlfriend returns. At the end of the night, as you're falling asleep with Alex, she thanks you again for coming. Half drunk, she confesses that she thought you were going to flake out and was pleasantly surprised that you managed to come out. She says it lovingly, but you're not quite sure how you feel about that statement. It's a little afternoon on a muggy Saturday. Your mother has come over for a surprise visit, claiming loudly that she doesn't see you enough, so she decided to invite herself over. As you converse, she walks around your place and you get the distinct impression that you're being inspected. "So what's going on with you lately?" she asks abruptly. Taken somewhat aback by this left failure, you tell her you're not sure what she means. She repeats the question, saying that you haven't seemed like yourself lately. She gestures to the dirty dishes piled in the sink and notes the fact that you haven't called or visited in a while. Your reticence only seems to spur her on more. She presses you, asking if you're having problems at work or with Alex, and you're beginning to feel increasingly battered by her sudden, well-meaning but overwhelming inquisition. Under her questions, you become increasingly uncomfortable. You want to be able to explain to her how you've been feeling, but the truth is you're not really sure yourself. Nothing horrific has happened at work or with your significant other or friends or anything like that, but all the same, you can't deny that lately you've just felt drained, as though you're not really here. You wish you could tell your mother these things, and she hasn't been approachable about negative emotions in the past. She's the kind of person who holds the opinion that the solution to any problem is to simply try harder and maintain a positive attitude, a stance that has reared its head in past conversations while you've begun to explore the subject with her. You know she's unlikely to be understanding, and you feel the energy drain out of you when you imagine what would happen if you managed to blurt out everything you were feeling. What do you do? Tell her that everything is fine and thank her for asking. Your mother looks at you from across the room with furrowed brows, and you wonder if the tone in your voice was the least bit convincing. She slightly opens her mouth as though she was about to say something more, but instead she digs through her purse for her cell phone, having apparently decided against it. "Well, as long as you're okay, honey," her voice trails. As your mother returns to what amounts to more or less small talk, you realize that this part of the conversation has happened a lot recently. Someone will express concern for you or ask if you're okay out of seemingly nowhere. You tend to find that it's simpler just to declare that you're okay than find the right words for complicated and murky feelings. Besides, since none of them are in reaction to a specific event, maybe you really are okay and just complaining about nothing anyway. Sometimes when you insist that you're okay to those who ask, you have to wonder if you're trying to convince them or yourself. It is a lazy Sunday morning. You are idly clicking around online as your phone rings. Sam, a coworker of yours that you're friendly with, asks how you are and makes hurried small talk with you. You typically only ever talk to him on the phone when one of you needs a shift covered, so it's slightly awkward. You're waiting in anticipation for him to ask you to come in on short notice when he veers the conversation in a completely different direction. "How do you feel about cats?" he asked. "Mine had kittens a few weeks ago, and I'm having an awfully hard time finding a home for the last one of the litter. You don't have any pets, right?" Takes you a moment to process this new information, and you're caught off guard as he begins to earnestly try and sell you on the idea of taking the last kitten off his hands. It's not something you had specifically considered before, and he seems fairly insistent. "She's a real sweetheart, really loves people. She got all her shots already taken care of, and the vet said she's healthy as a horse. I can bring her over by your place tonight if you're interested." You look around your apartment and try to picture a cat in it as he continues to tell you how cute she is. You tell him that this is all kind of sudden and that you don't have anything for the kitten set up here. "Oh, don't worry about that. I can bring over a litter box and food and all that, since you'd really be helping me out of a fix. It's the least I could do. I just don't want to have to put her in a shelter." You can't help but feel like you're being guilt-tripped, but you decide to give it some serious consideration. It does get awfully lonely around your apartment, and it might feel less empty with a cat around. However, since you've been feeling so down, it might not be a good idea to take on the responsibility of a cat, even if they're fairly low maintenance. Not knowing full well you can take great, so can't. I find it interesting that it's crossing off any possible options. It's basically saying this is what a normal person. These are the two options of a normal person, but you, as a depressed person, you don't have the ability to choose those. I'm becoming a cat owner. You accept the offer of the kitten and hang up shortly after making arrangements when your coworker can drop her off tonight. You're not entirely sure what to expect. You spend the rest of the afternoon researching cat care online and trying to think of a name. The evening rolls around and you hear a knock at your door, startling you out of reading Wikipedia entirely too hard. You take possession of a small, terrified black and white kitten in a carrier, along with everything you need to start taking care of her. You take her into your bedroom, close the door, and open the door to the carrier excitedly. She cowers in the back of it and you back off. Feeling slightly defeated, you remember what you researched on introducing a kitten to a new home, and leave her alone to go mess around on your computer, hopefully checking over your shoulder every so often to see if she has come out yet. She hides inside her carrier periodically, making sorrowful cat howls long enough for you to start worrying that she doesn't like you. By the time you go to bed, she's curled up at the foot of it, eyeing you nervously before falling asleep. Over the next few days, you gain her trust and she begins affectionately following you around, sleeping on you, and hopping up on you anytime you sit down to do some work. It's a late Friday afternoon and quitting time is just around the corner. A bright, clear day is giving way to a still, temperate evening. You can hear your co-workers all around you, anxiously making plans for their evenings and weekends, but you're really looking forward to just going home and resting after what's turned out to be a very long and taxing work week. Just before the end of your shift, you get a call from Alex. It seems a group of your mutual friends are heading out to a nearby pub for dinner and drinks to celebrate at the end of the week, and they want to know if you'd like to come along. You tentatively tell her that you're emotionally exhausted from the work week, and a social outing like that would just take too much out of you today. You encourage her to go and have a good time, since you know it's been a while since she's gone out with friends, but the effort feels futile, since you know that she isn't going to go without you. A couple of hours later, the two of you find yourselves in a familiar position, on the couch watching comedy shows on Netflix, a box of pizza open on the coffee table in front of you. As you look across the couch at her, you start to feel anxious. You feel bad about effectively forcing the two of you to stay in tonight again. While you are always appreciative of your partner's efforts, you take your feelings into account and help make sure that you're socially comfortable. You sincerely worry that you're holding her back from enjoying a more fulfilling relationship. While she does seem to enjoy spending time with you, as the two of you sit in comfortable, almost contented silence watching old shows you've each seen 2 or 3 times before, your ever-increasing fear that your relationship is becoming one-sided weighs more and more heavily on you. You feel more than ever like a burden or a reward to her. It's virtually impossible for you to see what value you could possibly offer to her in return. Worst of all, this nagging fear has made you feel more self-conscious than ever, withdrawing ever inwards. You've started to pull away even from Alex herself. What do? Despite the bad times, your girlfriend sincerely loves your relationship. No, that's not possible. Tell her how important she is to you and enjoy your evening. Apparently that's not acceptable either. Ask if she's happy with her relationship, or don't say anything. I'm gonna ask. You look over at Alex, who hasn't noticed you watching her yet. You try to parse the expression on her face. You worry that it's one of sheer boredom and bare tolerance. You wonder if she's thinking about all the fun things she could have been doing tonight if she wasn't trapped on this couch with you, ordering from one of the same 3 takeout places that you always order from. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. A sense of disappointing her creeps over you as you picture what the night could have been if you had just accepted the invitation she made earlier. I know this is a pretty boring Friday night for you. Are you really happy being with me, being like this? She turns to look at you, forehead wrinkled. Why do you ask me that so often? You feel her body stiffen and pull away from yours a little. Well, I mean, you start but are unable to think of how to answer. No, it's not what you'd usually be up to. For that one. Look, if that were the case, I would let you know. I don't think you're boring. You're more of a homebody than I am. I'm learning how to deal with that. Deal with it, you think, repeating in your mind. Does she see you as a problem to be dealt with? You try to pick her reply apart in your mind, and all of your conclusions lead to your previous worry, that you're holding her back. You're beginning to think that the phrasing was chosen without too much deliberation, and that despite her attempts at reassuring you, the slip of the tongue revealed her true feelings. As you picture how much fun she would be having right now if you had only accepted her invitation and managed to somehow get over your reservations and anxieties, despite not knowing how you would go about that, she cuddles back up to you. Thanks for putting up with me, you say, staring at the TV without actually watching it. She sighs in response. It's a breezy Sunday afternoon. You've allowed Amanda, an old friend from school that is in town for the weekend, to talk you into leaving the house for coffee and catch-up. You meet her in a small cafe and talk about what you've been up to since you've last seen each other. But you can't help but feel like they're a lot more accomplished and interesting than you while you're listening to them talk about their life at school after school. When it's your turn to brief them on your activities, you feel anxious and ashamed and give a very abbreviated version. You try to talk about your job as little as possible, and you feel incredibly boring while you describe it, despite her expressing sincere interest in you and your life. Amanda has known you long enough to read your mood and tone of voice. She leans in to ask a question while gently touching your hand, a look of genuine concern on her face. What's wrong? Do you... Test the waters, open up a little, hoping she'll understand, insist that nothing is wrong, and change the subject, defensively ask what she means by that, notice that your hands are shaking. Though you find it hard to lay out how you're feeling lightly to other people, you decide to test the waters on opening up to Amanda. She's always been easy to talk to, and you feel like it's possible that she might be understanding of what's been going on with you, even if you think it doesn't make sense sometimes. You begin to dance around the subject, dipping your toe into the pool to test the water. Surprisingly, she catches on quickly and is even able to guess what you may say next. She asks the right questions, leading you to elaborate on your emotional state. You apologize profusely the entire time, feeling like you're being obnoxious, but she reassures you that you aren't burdening her. Amanda reveals to you that her mother suffers from clinical depression and that she has spent many nights talking her through very similar feelings. She mentions that therapy and medication have helped her tremendously, and suggests you give it a try. You fight it and feel somewhat like a charity case, but she tells you that she'll get the number of her mother's therapist and email it to you as soon as she can. Afterward, conversation drifts back to small talk and shared hobbies, and you spend a pleasant afternoon together. For the rest of the day, you find yourself wondering if therapy or medication can really help you, if you have an illness or you're simply complaining too much, and remember horror stories you've heard about antidepressants. You're not sure what she'll do if she remembers to email you the number for the therapist, and you secretly hope she'll forget about it so you can avoid dealing with it at all. I think that this is going to be... Hang on. Brother, okay. There's no real way for me to play... Well, there is, but I think I'm just done playing this game. It's very interesting and a very good game. But I just... For the type of series this is, then this is probably the best stopping point. So, in the next episode of the free Steam game stuff, we're gonna do this Deb guy thing. See you guys then.